Okay, go.
Welcome, everyone, to Monday Musings. I'm Dr. Syra, and I am um, the clinical director of Dragonfly Wellness and the co founder of Dragonfly Academy.
And my name's Faison Sabzeli. I'm a life and relationship coach at Dragonfly Wellness. We're excited. There's been a lot of work we've been doing, not on Monday Musics, but other things. So we're excited about kind of what's coming up. Any case, today, February
We're
is sorry, March.
March. We're in a new month, and so we've got a new
Well,
topic.
March. We've got a new topic, and the topic is self-doubt. And you asked me an interesting question on our walk yesterday. It's like, are you ready to live this for the full month?
Yeah, because that's what happens every time we have a topic for Monday Musings. Then we find ourselves living it and having like field experience
Yeah.
and clinical in the chair experience of the topic. And so self doubt is something that has cycled around for Faizan and I many times through our lives,
Still does. Yeah.
still does. And
Hmm.
so we're talking about it. And so we'd be really interested to hear your questions and your thoughts for those who are here with us live on Zoom.
Yeah. So please, as always, ask your question in the chat.
We
And
won't use your name, but we will respond to anything that you write in the chat.
yeah. Yeah. So where I wanted to start, Syra, today
Mm-hmm.
was to talk about what causes self-doubt,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, so in your experience, like there's different uh, I guess different triggers that causes us to be self-doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And is self-doubt actually good? Some of it, I guess, right? Can it be beneficial? So I wanted to start there first, so we can
So
kind of level
what
set.
what do you think causes self-doubt? Any guesses for people who are here with us live? Any guesses of what you think might cause self-doubt? Do you have guesses, Face?
I've got a chart.
You made a
No.
chart.
I have to make a chart. It's just,
It's
it's a bubble top. It's my note
you took
cards.
notes.
Stop using my notes, damn it. Get your
So
own.
what are some things that might cause self-doubt? From a therapist perspective, the most obvious one is our past experiences, right? So where um, it's a necessary part of human development that we realize we can't do everything, right? It's necessary. So a simple example is learning about your body capacity and what's possible. So you'll have um, a 2-year-old, right, that might climb up on something and jump off and climb up on something and jump off. And they're doing that and they're getting comfortable with that. And then as they grow to a 5-year-old, they might jump up on something a little higher and jump off. And, you kind of slowly build your courage and you slowly build your capacity
Mhm.
in your physical body. So that's normal and that we've all done that. And those of us who had parents who were like, oh, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, maybe actually didn't get the chance to start to build that capacity and that courage because we were like restricted by with well-intentioned parents that wanted us to be safe, but that might mean that we now never got that confidence or that ease in jumping off of something or whatever the example might be. And so one of the ways that self-doubt can happen is when the people who are raising us are fearful. That can really plant the seed of self-doubt. That's
Mhm.
one obvious thing.
Right. Yeah, and
But
that.
there's other things. I can't blame everything on your parents all the time. Right? But that
Yeah.
that can be one really strong reason that we
Right.
have self-doubt.
So, so yeah, I think, I mean, we've talked about this, right? Like that we a lot of our kind of mental health, uh, is it
Wellness
or yeah, wellness deficiencies.
challenges,
Challenges gotta go back to,
shortcomings.
yeah, they go back to not how we were raised, right? Like again, because the language, again, I think the way we use language is important, right? We don't want to come off blaming our
Mm-hmm.
parents. Yes, could they have done better? Sure, right?
But so could
But
we.
yeah, but I think just taking some of that personal responsibility back
Mm-hmm.
is that in the childhood we perceived that situation to be something, right? So
Right.
when our parents said, "Don't do it, don't jump off that couch," we took it as, "Oh, we're not able to," not, "Hey, you may hurt yourself. I'm just trying to protect you,"
Right.
right? Like we couldn't interpret that message. So the way we interpreted it, because there are other kids who'd be like, "Yeah, I'll show you," right?
Right.
Like, and then that kind of gets them into this rebellion mode, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and anyway, so I think it's how we perceive our past, right? So that's one. Where does kind of culture and society play a part? Because with self doubt, there's this kind of linkage with in the imposter syndrome, right? And there's been kind of studies now being done, like some of the studies that were originally done about imposter syndrome and all of those things. They came out of certain movements, right? And but it's like we kind of bought into, oh yeah, we must have doubt
So
because it must be less than.
there's some, if you look at cultures around the world, there's some cultures that have more risk taking, right, than others. So
Yeah.
certain cultures where you'll be encouraged to take a risk or try something new or do something even though you might not be very good at it, just try it out. And so in those cultures and communities, that confidence or that risk taking ability is cultivated.
Mm.
Whereas in other communities, maybe playing it safe is what makes sense, especially immigrant communities, because if you're coming to a new place, you're wanting to fit in, you're wanting to be accepted, and so you might not be encouraged to take as many risks growing up in an immigrant community in different parts of the world, right? Because again, the goal is safety. The goal is not necessarily experiences, though experiences are great, but safety's
Safety is the
more
key.
important. The brain will prioritize safety over fun every single time.
Right.
Like that's, unless you're a teenager, then the brain does a different kind of thing.
Right. And so I think different, like depending on your um, immigration status, not the immigration itself status, but like kind of where you are in those stages, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like our parents who were kind of, they just dropped everything, came here,
Mm-hmm.
versus us who kind of had our feet in both worlds.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one, right? And then there's kind of like our kids who have no experience of this. Kind of, I mean, we tell them, but they have no personal memories of immigrating.
However,
Okay. However,
so I want to talk to you about trauma a little bit because that is very much linked to self-doubt. Because self-doubt can become a safety lever, right? That it's, you should doubt yourself because if you don't, you could get into trouble. So I'm going to tell you about this study that they did on rats. I think have I talked about the cherry blossom study?
I don't know.
Okay, maybe not.
You talk about a lot of things I don't pay attention to.
So they did this study with rats, and I wish I remembered the name of the researchers and the time frame, but I don't right now. So they did this study with rats where they had pregnant rats, and what they would do, they have them in a cage, and they would put a puff, like they puff a scent, so the scent of cherry blossoms. They puff that scent into the cage area, and as soon as the rat like smelled it, there would be the cage floor would be electrocuted, like they get an electric shock. Okay, so what they started doing is associating that cherry blossom smell with this electric shock. Yeah. These rats eventually learned very quickly to, when they smelled the cherry blossom smell, to try to run, like try to get away or minimize the impact of that electric shock. What's really fascinating, so there's two things about the study that are really fascinating. The first thing is those babies, when they were born, having never been physically shocked themselves outside the mother's body, because when they were pregnant, they were feeling that cortisol, that stress response. When they smelled cherry blossom, they would go into a fight or flight response. Mm-hmm. So their heart rate would increase. They had this, what they call an aversive reaction. They were afraid of the cherry blossom smell. Isn't that amazing? Even though it was their mothers were pregnant.
Right.
Now, they didn't smell the smell, right? But somehow that got coded into them that this is a dangerous thing. What's really fascinating about this study is that then they took rats who were not pregnant, just regular lady rats and boy, like just rats. They went through the same thing with the cherry blossom and the electric shock. And then these rats got pregnant. The female rats, they got pregnant, 6 months or some later time they got pregnant. Those babies that were born, even and then during that pregnancy, there was no shocks. There was nothing bad happening to them. Just a regular life. Those babies that were born were afraid of the cherry blossom smell. So even though this experience happened to the mother months before she was pregnant, those babies came out coded to avoid the cherry blossom smell.
So how do you? I mean, that's
What?
yeah.
So what that tells us about trauma is that a woman can have a traumatic experience. Now, again, we're not rats. We're more complicated than rats. But what's really interesting about humans is that we pass along stories.
Oh.
So not just DNA, we also pass along our stories. And then those become like signposts about how people should behave. So it's not a one-to-one, but if you think about it, trauma gets, when we talk about, these studies were about intergenerational trauma. How does it actually get passed on? Is it coded in the DNA? Or so there's always going to be that combination of things. But my experiences before I was a mother are going to impact my children's responses to certain triggers.
Right.
Like it's just going to happen partly genetically, but also partly the stories that I will now tell, the way that I will show up in the world will impact the way my kids show up. It's just how it is. Now you can undo that, you can reverse that, you can repair that. But if you don't do anything, then that unconscious memory just gets passed.
Right. So how speaking
Talk about self-doubt now.
Yeah, specifically
Yeah.
with self-doubt, right?
Yeah.
For those of I mean, again, maybe not everyone, but maybe all of us have had certain experiences, right? Like, so either our parents immigrated,
Mm-hmm.
they pushed against all odds to come to a different land and make a life,
Mm-hmm.
or our parents have like moved away from families, whatever, right? Maybe they didn't move countries, but they've done things, but then
Or
we're
maybe
not.
they've been through a war,
Yeah,
or maybe, right?
and
Like,
we're not able to, right? Or what is like?
what
How
do you mean
come?
we're not
How
able?
come our parents were able to do certain things and we don't have the
grit?
confidence, or not the grit? The grit is a different story, but like, how come we don't have a confidence to take that step, to make those types of decisions?
Can you give me an example?
I don't know. It's hard for me to give you an example because not particularly, but like, okay, let's take our parents as an example, right? Like they moved
So
countries,
talk about yourself.
but they moved countries.
Okay, so your parents moved.
I had to move countries too, but it's from US to Canada. It's not really a big culture shock. So, but if you ask me, right, like, hey, I don't know, there was an opportunity in South America. I'm like, no, I don't think I can. I have that.
But if
I
you
have that
think
in
about
me.
it, Faze, you also moved cultures in a way to live in a small town.
Sure,
That
but
like don't.
like, that's why I'm saying
discount that, right?
but that's why okay. So that's
So
why I'm saying don't use me as an example
might
because
not.
I've done things that that required me to actually push back against people, right? To even make the move to Canada and all of those things, right? But
Right.
so don't use me as an example.
So
But
what you're saying that they were more courageous
yeah,
and that
yeah.
self-doubt got passed on?
And how are they able to just say, okay, we're gonna do certain things, be able to
I
make
think
show up with confidence?
a big part of it was survival. When you have a choice of death or like unsafety versus safety, you're going to choose safety and you're going to do whatever it takes to get safety. Right? And so that's where when if our parents lived through war, for example, whether it's Civil War or World War II, like whatever war, they had to make choices about survival. And those are easy choices to make. You're always going to choose what's going to keep you alive. Even if it's hard, death is harder than, right? Our instinct is to choose what keeps us alive. When you don't have that threat of safety, so it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? When your basic needs are met, then you have bandwidth to think about other things, to think about how do I feel about making this choice? Not I just have to make this choice to survive. Do I want to make this choice? Becomes a question.
Yeah.
Whereas in survival, that's not a question. It's, of course, I want to stay alive. Like, that's not even a question. So asking ourselves those deeper questions, do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this? That's a luxury because we're not in survival mode. So parents took risks to invest everything they had in a business Your generations will not do that because of fear of being moneyless.
Maybe.
I'm like, we just
I'm
invested
like,
everything we have in our business.
we got no money left now. I'm like, wait, what? But okay, so there, you know what it is. Partly what I think sometimes,
Hmm.
and I've been thinking about this because a couple of weeks ago I was just thinking about my dad, and end of February was kind of 34 years since we left, at least for me, Pakistan.
Hmm.
Right. And so I was just kind of, we're just thinking about it and kind of feeling this um, sense of pride that, of course, they made that choice. They were able to make that choice. And it's like, am I living up to that potential of that sacrifice? Right? Am I actually uh, giving it all? Like that was kind of the reflection point. And And one of the things I was thinking about was this unrealistic expectations, right? Like, so I think part of
Hmm.
self doubt comes from this unrealistic expectations. Because what am I going to do in my life that's going to match up with that sacrifice?
Right.
That's going to compare with that sacrifice. So, like, I was thinking, right? Like, okay, yes, we've invested all our money. Could we lose it? Absolutely. Could we make it back? Possibly. Whatever, right? Like, but it doesn't compare to those sacrifices that they had to make, right? Like
Right.
having he was fine, my dad at least, right? My mom was also fine, but like my dad was fine. He was a vice president of a clothing factory, and
So what?
but he came here.
But
I mean,
my question is,
yeah.
why do you feel you have to make a sacrifice
No, no,
that
but
way?
but
Like to
that's what I was.
match
Yeah, but that's what I
what?
was thinking. It's like it's like we have to be better, right? Like so that unrealistic expectation gets set up. I think in some of our minds, not maybe not everybody, but we look at our parents and we say, "Oh, we have to do it this much better." If they were able to push through, right? Like that piece about grit and all of those, and they were able to push through, I should be able to.
Right, but they were able to push through, but at a cost. And now we know that, right? And so much of there's a particular generation that has riddled with health problems, riddled with physical health problems, because there wasn't room to stop and rest and ask yourself, is this what you want? And you just had to survive. And so all of that energy, all of that emotional energy just goes into the body. And then you have so many health issues, so
Yeah.
many. So there was a um, a fallout to those decisions to push and push. And you know what's interesting? I was reading this thing about millennials, the old millennials they're called. So people born in the 80s, late 70s into the 80s, and how there was this narrative about just push harder, and you should be able to achieve that, right? And so that's the generation that's like dealing with burnout because the idea was just push harder. And what we've done is we've created a physiology in our bodies that is stress based. And if we don't feel stressed, we think there's something wrong.
Right.
And so we've taken, it's like that rat who's in survival mode and you just always in survival mode. And if you're not in survival mode, you actually can't get anything done
Right.
because you don't have any other motivator besides fear, right? So if fear is not motivating you, well, then how do you get stuff done? And I've been talking to clients about this, right?
So I think again, yeah. So some of this is like kind of getting to that intrinsic ability to make those decisions, I guess. So if we're talking about self doubt, right? Like so we've talked about kind of doubt coming to us from our upbringing, possibly trauma, past, right? Like
The society,
the
what
past
they,
events,
mm-hmm,
society, kind of how those society and culture really
mm-hmm,
how those expectations were set and some of our own unrealistic expectations that we might have. So saying all of that, right? Like, and then you kind of went into the route of okay, wherever it comes from, this is where it leads. So one of the places it leads is stress and burnout,
mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
Like how, like what, that they're
Oh,
like
because
what
you're always trying to
happens?
prove yourself, right? When you're feeling self doubt, there's this impulse to always prove yourself because it's like,
Okay, so that's one side of it, right? Like where you're actually doing more than maybe
compensation.
compensation. Okay.
So you feel small, so then you do extra, right? And somebody asked a question: does being an introvert contribute to having self doubt? Not necessarily, because extroverts can sometimes put on masks, so they're not actually, don't feel like they're showing people who they are anyway, and so they're doubting, but they're putting on a mask. So not introversion and extroversion in the research doesn't really link up to self-doubt. It might look like extroverts are more confident, but that again could be a mask, so it doesn't necessarily
Yeah, no, I
link
think,
to that.
like, I know,
Good question though.
introverts who are very confident,
Confident, yeah.
and they're able to make certain decisions. I, I feel like there's certain situations, even though I'm an introvert,
Mhm.
right? Like this is about as 60% of my conversation for the week is on Monday musings. About 60%.
not joking.
But like from an introvert perspective, I feel like there's certain areas where I can make decisions.
Yeah.
Certain areas I still have self-doubt, right? No question about it.
So
So
self-doubt coming from
yeah.
lack of confidence, experience, negative self-talk of not good enough. Somebody's writing this in the comments. I don't know anything. I can't do anything right. Other people's judgment, people pleasing, fear of making a mistake, etc.
Right.
So where I want to take this, if you'll come with me on a journey, what if you knew that you were not your personality, that you were not your thoughts, and you were not your body? What if you knew that you were actually this spiritual being, this holy, sacred self that was just light, and that's who you really were? See, when we tune into that, we can't have self-doubt. Self-doubt cannot exist when we really know who we truly are.
Yeah.
Because when we really know who we truly are, then we're just following our guidance system. So there isn't that, should I do this or should I do this? Pros and cons list. Da, 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 da. It's like, this is my next natural step. And I'm being actually instructed and guided to do this next thing.
But now the way you're talking about it, that goes beyond just like I was just listening to my gut.
No,
Like this
because
goes
your
beyond
gut can also be fear-based trauma response.
right. It's an emotion
Right?
based. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now this is something else, right? So like, and you talked about a couple of things. So before we kind of go, how we kind of get through this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, I wanted to quickly point out. So you talk about stress and burnout.
Mm-hmm.
Like how does this how does self-doubt lead to stress and burnout? So you talked about overcompensating,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's also
People
this
pleasing.
people pleasing, as
Yeah.
somebody's pointed out here, which is great. There's this the fear, as again that person pointed out, but there's also this kind of we've heard about decision paralysis, right? Where you just kind of are not able to make a decision, right? Which then of course leads to more stress, which leads to that constant.
And that not making a decision is because the question is, what if I make the wrong decision?
Right.
But again, if we take a step back into our spiritual self, then every experience is an opportunity for growth. So even if I make the wrong decision, well, then there's some learning in that for me.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Okay, so
there's no, like,
so
if I
yes,
have two options,
yeah,
like this house, right? When we were picking, we were down to two houses, and it was this house and another house, and I wanted the other house. I really wanted it.
thank God somebody listened to Faison.
Didn't get it. It didn't. The deal fell through. So we got this house, and I was so disappointed. Like, so disappointed at this house. The more I live here, the more I'm like, thank God we got this house. Like, it has little nooks and crannies. There's lots of space for everyone. It's bright and it's open. And the front door actually is right by the driveway. So you don't have to walk around a whole thing to get to the front door. Which things I didn't think about when I was looking at that house, right?
I'm trying to get to Seminar.
Yeah, or getting to the highway in less than an hour, So, but at the time it felt like this is the wrong choice. This is not what I want.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want this. But if I could trust that, okay, even the things that I think I don't want, even the things that don't feel good in the moment, even those things, there's some reason for that.
Right.
So it's about meaning making. And narrative therapy talks a lot about this, right? The meaning making. That what meaning are you giving this thing?
Mm.
If we can find meanings and reasons, then even our detours can have value. And that's so important with, like, especially with people who have depression, right? So they might have a depressive episode and they're like, oh, I wasted a year of my life. I wasted 3 years, whatever it is. And it's like, but even that detour has, like, can we find the value in that? Can we find the learning in that? Can we find the resilience and the grit that you had to develop through as you walked that really difficult time, rather than you wasted this time.
So do you so spiritual alignment? How does that line up with the kind of the mainstream psychology? Would we say that mainstream psychology
Mm-hmm.
and its view of uh, self doubt by using things like CBT and
Mm-hmm.
reframing our negative thoughts?
Mm-hmm.
So how do those like it, is it the same? Is it similar? Is it is it
So
totally different and
I can
totally
talk about transpersonal psychology. That was my training, right? And in transpersonal psychology, the philosophy is you have a part of you that was never touched by any of it. It remained whole and it remained pure and good, and we can call that the soul or the higher self or whatever name you want to give it. That there's a part of you that was never affected and never touched. And so from that perspective, you can have all these life experiences happening to you. And if you identify yourself as your thoughts and your feelings, well then yeah, you're going to be doing a lot of this in your life, right? Because thoughts come and go, feelings come and go, good things happen, bad things happen. But then our locus of control, what matters is things happening on the outside impact me, impact my feelings, impact my thoughts. And then I have to ride this roller coaster of my inner space.
Mm,
Versus an internal locus of control, remembering that there's a part of me that never got depressed, that remained steady throughout my depression. There was a part of me that never got postpartum. There was a part of me that never broke my tailbone, right? Like it just remained whole despite these life experiences that were happening to me. If I can identify with that, well, there's no self-doubt there. Because I can't do this life wrong. I mean, it's a big concept, right?
so would you say like things like reframing the thoughts,
Those are
the
helpful.
the emotional work, is that a step towards that? What is it? The
Yes.
spiritual alignment that you're calling it?
So, I'm glad
So
so we're talking about one of the things that Texas and I are going to be teaching in our 16th on the workshop on Back to Basics
yeah.
is this thing called spiritual bypass. We're going to talk about spiritual bypass, and we're going to talk about the difference between spirituality and spiritual reality, which are two different things.
Mm,
And in spiritual bypass, we say, oh, you're just a soul. And so, like, kind of what I'm talking about here, but saying, therefore, you don't have to think about your emotions and you don't have to worry about your thoughts. That's the mistake, right? There is value in cleaning all that up when we're on a spiritual journey. Because if we don't clean all that up, it comes out sideways in other places. And it can come out, it can feel like we're surrounded by crazy people or angry people or people in drama, and I'm trying to walk this spiritual path, but there's all these people in drama around me. Well, then likely there's some spiritual bypass happening internally, because it means that I haven't integrated those human parts of me, right? I haven't, because we're in a human body. We have to be able to integrate and allow for that roller coaster. We have to know how to ride that roller coaster and then choose to get off of it. Many of us just say, oh, that roller coaster is no fun, so you're getting off of it, but it's still riding in the background. It's still there. It's around you. So that's one of the things that we'll be doing in our training,
yeah.
teaching people
So
about
there's this important question here,
yeah.
or a comment. You want to
Oh,
quickly?
what a good one.
Yeah.
So here's the question. I tried to find the value in the first detour, but by the third or fourth, etc. detour, it's hard to continue trying to take the good meaning out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
So
fair.
how do you address that, right? Because I think that's the piece. It's like, oh, I was, I thought I was getting better,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Another detour.
another detour, or I have to take a step back, right? I thought I was doing something, and this could be with anything, but with self doubt and with depression and anxiety, all of those types of things. Is like thought I was doing better,
Mm-hmm.
so what's this spiritual purpose, and now going through the third or fourth or fifth or
I
sixth
wonder
time.
if there's anyone on our call who's a cancer survivor, who's had more than one cancer scare. How did you navigate that? Because see, with mental health, sometimes we feel like it's our fault. It's my
Yeah.
fault that I'm in this depressive episode. Oh, fuck, I'm here again. But if we thought about it again from a health perspective, that, oh, okay, so some things are reoccurring,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I have what's called major depressive disorder. That means it's a lifelong condition, right? That means that there's going to be ups and there's going to be downs, and there might be really, really bad downs. And that's part of the condition,
Yeah.
right? So Do we have anyone on our call? I don't know if we do, who's a multiple survivor, right? How have you managed to do that? Survive something more than once. If and we're assuming here that the person who's asking the question, it could be anything though that's a detour, right? Something where you go off track and then
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I'm off track again.
So okay, so I mean, how do you find meaning?
How do I find meaning?
Yeah, as you go through your
Mm-hmm.
episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Episodes. Can I call it that? Is that
Yeah, I don't know.
multiple times?
For me, it's becoming. I see it as I'm in this lifetime for some reason. I don't know the reason, but in this lifetime, my soul decided to walk the journey of the dark night of the soul, and I'm not the only one. My brother walks that path too, right?
Yeah.
The dark night of the soul, and the challenges, and the another thing, and another thing, and another thing, and so for me, when I'm well, I try to remember to stay grateful that I'm well.
Yeah.
And when I'm not well, now I remember that I'm not alone in it. I have my people, I have my groups, I have my therapists, I have my systems
Yeah.
that I hold on to like a life raft. But I've had to develop those systems from the first time, and this like I've had to,
Yeah.
I've had those early detours got me really familiar with the terrain.
Yeah.
So when I find myself in this terrain again, it's a little less consuming.
Right. But how do you find that alignment to spirituality? It's, and so you know I guess one of the things, if I may comment, not on your experience.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're your experience, not mine.
Yeah, and again, I'm just speaking from my own. Other people will
Yeah.
have different experiences.
I think we have this belief system. I wrote it down somewhere. It came to me. Anyways, that this life, and when we're spiritually aligned, that we're gonna be happy
Right.
every day, every
You're
moment.
going to be peaceful. You're going to be
Yeah.
happy. You're going to feel good about your life. You're going to be
Right.
grateful.
And part of this spiritual walk, right, this spiritual alignment, is not that it's going to be perfect in our whatever our definition of perfect is. That it's not going to be that, I won't lose people in my life.
We will.
I will lose people in my life. That I won't gain and lose money.
Mhm.
I will. It's not that I won't gain and lose anything,
Mhm.
right? And I think sometimes we have this this thing about peace and prosperity all the time, and I think it's like this thing about those moments that when they show up, it's like, oh yeah, right? But it's not going to be this perfect life.
So Chuck Swazzano talks about in a healing journey. I'm probably going to misquote him, but generally he talks about how when we're on a healing path, anything that is not love will come up for healing. There's a lot of things that are not love on this planet.
Including
here's the next part.
Including our self-doubt.
Right? And once we're done our own healing, like once I've actually done my work and moved it through and da-da-da, well then I get to, if I want, help with the collective healing. So now I'm going to be processing and moving through emotion that's not even mine. Now I'm doing ancestral healing for my whole lineage. Now I'm doing healing for my whole community. So I'm allowing these and so that's another thing with my depressive episodes is that I've started telling myself, and this is maybe just a story I'm telling myself to feel better, but it's making me feel better, is that I'm doing the healing not just for me, but for my whole family. Mm-hmm. So the people in my family who don't have the luxury of crying or staying home or taking that month off work and just dealing with the feelings, there's lots of people, and when I talk about family, I mean my extended family with my cousins and my aunts and uncles and my grandparents, and so somebody's got to hold the darkness. And in this lifetime, maybe I volunteered and said, okay, pick me. Don't pick me. Don't pick me. But I'm going to walk that walk. And it's a freaking hard walk. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't wish this for anybody. But this is how I make meaning. And I think my therapist has really helped me with that. What does this mean? Right? Because otherwise it's pointless and meaningless. And that's that little voice of depression loves the pointless and the meaningless. It can totally get you to bad places, that pointless, meaningless voice.
So we've talked about the spiritual alignment then, right? Like
Yeah.
so beyond your therapist, how have your kind of those spiritual advisors, your spiritual teachers,
Mm-hmm.
and your spiritual work actually like, because I think again it's not about
Well, it's about, for me, it's
like
about,
you're not trying to get through the depressive episode anymore. It feels like
I just
right.
ride it.
Yeah, it's just like okay, can I just be present with it? But
Yeah.
how does the spiritual? How do the what are some of the spiritual principles that kind of play into that for you to say okay, I can stay with this, I can hold this.
Well, first of all, there's only one of us here. So if I'm suffering, then I'm tuning into one element of the human experience, but not the whole of human experience. So even in my suffering, sometimes I can now remember that there's more than this. There's something else besides this suffering. So I'm not as lost anymore.
Right.
Because I know that there's more. Even just intellectually, I know that there's something more, right? Also, that spiritual part of me isn't afraid.
So how do you
not
separate yourself, right? Like so that's the other thing. Then so I mean
I think of it as
we've taken self doubt into a different realm than I think we were planning to, at least for the first conversation, right? But let's go there. So how do you separate this so called weak minded people that you know we've been told we are when we have self doubt or we have anxiety or we have depression or whatnot that we're weak. So how do you separate that talk
narrative. Yeah.
and that narrative
So
from
I would say, so I like Eckhart Tolle's language. He talks about the egoic mind and the higher self. That's kind of how he languages it, right? So the egoic mind is the brain that was developed for survival. That's its job, is to keep you alive. And it will tell you whatever you need to hear so that you stay alive. And usually that means that you're not going to take risks. You're not going to try things. You're going to do things in a familiar way.
so alive but not thrive.
At least alive. He would love for you to thrive too, but if it had to choose alive or dead, it'll choose alive. It's like what I was talking about before, right? With the survival piece.
Mm-hmm.
So when we can become aware that we're multiplicity, like there's multiple parts in me. So one of my teachers used to say, like, who's the conductor? There's all of these parts in me. There's this orchestra. So there's the flute player and there's the drummer and there's all of these parts. Who's the conductor? Is it the egoic mind that's the conductor? You might still have beautiful music, right? But it'll be effortful. It'll be hard to make sure everybody's playing. And then there's the conductor that's the higher self that's like, it's more effortless.
Yeah.
And so when I'm feeling like things are really hard, then I kind of check in and I reach out to my teachers and my mentors, and I go to my groups, and I don't just like sit there and meditate. I mean, I meditate as well, but I do other things with other humans to keep me grounded and keep me honest with myself. Because it's easy, I think, to kind of go into some la la land and be like, things are never going to be better, or things aren't really that bad when I'm on my own in my own depressed brain. Like that's not a safe place for me to be. So I make sure that I'm connected to other people.
Right.
Who understand that, and then other people who don't really understand that but love me.
Right. Right. And
so the self-doubt, I've found, since I had that experience, I had a really, really amazing experience a couple of weeks ago where I was just shown like just who I am, right? That I kind of got clicked back into that higher self, or whatever we call that. And it's like that place is just not afraid. So there's no doubt there because there's no self there. Yeah. I don't know if that makes, maybe I'm like going into La La Land now, people, but like there's no I.
So is that something just you can do?
What do you mean? Anybody can do it.
Right? Like how do you tune into that? Like what are...
Okay, so let's do it right now, everybody.
And I know in the course you're going to be talking about some of the foundational pieces.
Let's just do it right now.
Fine, but
let's just do it right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so get your feet on the floor, or if you're sitting with your feet under you, that's okay too, but just concentrate on your feet and your seat. And maybe just like roll your shoulders, like just kind of get to a comfortable position, move your body until you feel kind of neutral. And it helps a lot of people to close their eyes so they have one less kind of stimulus. So you might want to close your eyes if you're comfortable to do that. If you don't, that's okay. And we're just going to do something really simple, which is breathe. So you're going to take deep breaths, breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth is one way that people like to do it, but you can do it how you want. Just deep, full breaths. And you might even put one hand on your belly and feel your belly kind of expanding. See if you can breathe right down into your belly. And just let everything internally just settle. Just observing what's happening with your thoughts, feelings, body sensations. Just observing, just watching. Slow, full, deep breaths. Letting your thoughts just float by, just observing them, kind of like clouds in the sky. Okay, and coming back if you'd like, and returning. So that observer, that person that's watching, that's what I mean when I say your higher self. In DBT, that's called the wise mind. It's where the brain and the heart, the connection between our feelings and our thoughts, is like a third space. So we can get in touch with it anytime we want. We just have to remember that it exists and that the best way to get to it is to calm our nervous system, which is what the breathing helps with. Just calm down our nervous system.
Right. And being able to make decisions from that.
And from there, when you're observing, see, when I'm observing, I can say, oh, that's the voice of self-doubt. Interesting. Oh, that's the voice of competition. Interesting. Ooh, there's the voice of comparison. I'm comparing myself to other people and their experiences and saying why I'm better or worse. Ooh, there's the so that person watching, that's the truest, highest, is the way that it's been taught to me.
Right.
And if we can't do that, then we can call on somebody, a guide, a mentor, a teacher, somebody who you would give authority to get you back aligned, whoever that is, right? So for some of us, it might be a beloved grandparent or somebody who's passed away or a spiritual teacher or somebody who you feel could get you back there if you can't get there yourself.
Yeah. So I hope it helps that person that was talking about multiple detours and whatnot. I think this is the part, right? Like, it's just that this is not I think for me, I know whenever I feel like, okay, I'm going down this path again, and it's like now just looking at it, it's like, wait, this is not a detour. There's something I'm being called to do here that I wasn't called to do last time. And so at this time, right, like, so what is it that I'm being called? Like, okay, like you were talking about, like, when I go in now, it's like I'm being maybe feeling the pain of my ancestors, possibly, right? But like, okay, so what am I being called to do, right? And so like lately, whatever I've been going through, it's about this visionary leadership, not just not in front of people, but it's about this visionary leadership, like that's kind of showing up. So it's like, oh, I don't know what that means.
Or what to do about it.
Yeah, and to be afraid of it and all of, like, then I'm, now there's doubt coming from that, but it's like, okay, if that's what's being called, then I'll be shown the way as well. But I think part of it is having that trust, right? But when we're in our self-doubt, it's really, really difficult to trust.
Imagine if there was a part of yourself that you could always trust.
Yeah.
And that voice was internal. It was not outside of you. That's the hope. That's the practice to start cultivating and finding and hearing and listening for that voice that you just know you can trust.
And sometimes not even like, okay, I can't listen, but I know that that part is out there.
Somewhere. In here.
Somewhere.
It's not out there.
Somewhere. But in
Somewhere.
here, there, I've given that authority to an angel. I've given it authority to, I don't know, whatever your belief systems, doesn't matter. Right? Like that piece of spiritual and wisdom, the spiritual guidance and wisdom is available to me. I'm just not able to listen to it right now, but I know
because
it's available.
I'm suffering.
I think that's just it. I think there's just that grain of hope is good enough. At least that's what I found from my for whatever I go through. But it's like that grain will multiply
So what
eventually.
coming out of this
Yeah.
conversation, not where we thought it would go. No, it's not the car.
Not the cards that I wrote down.
Faison's never done that before. He's never like written cards, and I'm like, what is this card thing? But
And what was the point of me writing it? It went somewhere
just
else
go there.
anyways.
Throw it in the car. But it was interesting, right? Because
Yeah,
it
yeah.
generated, how to get out of self-doubt. Well, so one of the things you said that was support, right? So being around people that build
Yeah,
you up.
I think creating a community and tapping into the community. I've been leading a men's group locally in
Oh,
seminar.
P.S. For those who are not local, we have a new men's group starting April 2nd, every Tuesday online.
And
Check out our website.
Yeah, and Lucas, our new therapist, will be leading it, and it's awesome. But one of the things we kind of closed with one
Sorry,
in the last couple of weeks we've closed our session with is kind of holding on to each other and just saying, right, like no matter where you are, just tap into this right now, this moment, right, and being able to have that support group to say, you know what, that there's somebody. Doesn't matter if I ate the wrong thing that I said I wouldn't eat, if I did the wrong thing that I said I wouldn't do, if I whatever, right, like that. There's somebody out there
there's actually a group.
there's a group
Yeah.
that will accept me with all my flaws.
Right.
And like that is so important. It's a life-changing experience to be able to tap into that group, whether I actually reach out or whether I just think about that group, right? Like that there's somebody out there that's going to build me up. And I think that experience and taking those steps to find that group and having the courage to go find that group, because and it doesn't work the first time. The second time it's like, oh no, this group
Not
doesn't,
quite the match.
not quite the match. It's fine, but like being able to find that group where you can be like, you know what, no matter my flaws, I can show up here how I am. I think that alone, like it starts giving me room again for that hope to show up, right? So I think community and reaching out and learning from that community, I think
And what if we saw self-doubt as a warning bell? Because sometimes it's good to say, hey, wait, what am I doing here? Maybe this isn't the right next step. Right?
Yeah.
So knowing that it's adaptive and it's there for a reason, and it might be an old pattern that's replaying itself, but you get to check that. You get to say, self-doubt is up. What's that about? There's an approach in therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy, where we accept whatever is there. So whether you're in the valley or whether you're in the mountaintop or whether you're in the snake pit, you're going to say, okay, this is where I am. Now, what are the things I can do to support myself here? And who are the people and what are the practices to support myself here?
Yeah.
And accepting it, that like, okay, this is what it is. And sometimes you don't want to do that because you think, well, if I'm accepted, I'm never going to get out of it. But what we know, like when we accept an emotion, it changes. If we actually sit with a feeling without adding thoughts to it, it can change.
Right. And I think I actually had written down, right? Can doubt be beneficial? And part of it is that there is this, if I pay attention to it, that is an indication that I'm ready for some growth. I'm ready to step out of my normal and allow
And stretch.
and stretch, because it's like, okay, I've been blaming my parents for not giving me the confidence, whatever, right? Okay, now's my opportunity, and I was like that, and now's my opportunity to actually step in and take responsibility for my life.
Right.
Reframe their like reinterpret what they were trying to do, and then also take responsibility. You know what? They're not the ones holding me back. I'm the one holding me back, right? So, but that alone, right? Like once I paid attention to it, then there was an opportunity for growth. Yeah.
But you had to do that hard work also of saying, the way that I was raised did have an impact on my personality,
Sure.
right? And
Sure,
some people aren't even gonna do that. They're like, no, everything was fine, and that's that spiritual bypass.
And it's okay if everything is fine and you're still struggling with making decisions. You're still struggling with kind of moving forward with your plans, whatever it might be, whatever your self doubt is leading you to, right? Then what is it? Okay, it's not your childhood. There's something still causing. Not, you know what? There's nothing wrong with having self doubt. Self doubt is not something that will go away. At least I don't believe it will. Right? The ability to step through confidently and still make those decisions that I need to be able to take that step that my spiritual higher self is calling me to take, that I'm afraid to take.
Courage.
The courage to make whatever decisions, whatever steps I need to take. I think that's the big thing, right? Like, so why am I not able to do that? Why am I not giving into the courageous voice, and why am I giving into the self doubt
And
voice?
courage. I talked about this in my first TED talk. That courage, the Latin comes from the word cor, which is the heart, and so originally courage was seen as being heart led. So your heart is leading you, right? The head will take you lots of places. The head just wants to keep you alive. The heart is leading. And it's like, okay, so though my heart might be pounding in my chest as I take the step, it's leading me to this next thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's another language again, another word for that higher self, soul, whatever.
Yeah. So I think again that there is an opportunity for growth, right? So self doubt there's nothing bad about self doubt. If anything, it's giving you an indication that there is an opportunity for growth here.
And the self-doubt might be helpful, like that the 5-year-old maybe shouldn't be jumping off the top of the roof of the house.
Yeah.
Maybe wait till you're 16 to try that, right? But so it's adaptive for us to be a little bit wary, but then not to live there and get stuck there for the rest of our life in the doubt and the I don't.
Sometimes doubt also opens up avenues for humility and all. Like, hey, maybe I don't know. Like, yeah, maybe I don't know. I need to go learn, right? Like rather than just showing up and saying, okay, yeah, let me see if I can I'll just make it up on the
Wing
spot. Yeah, and yeah, okay, yeah, you can wing it, but you'll get caught at some point, right? So the idea of being having some humility to say, you know what, maybe I don't know, being able to say I don't know, and then having the courage to go find out what I don't know, right? All of those kind of play a role. So there's nothing wrong with self doubt. It's just how we act once we've got the doubt, right? Like, what are we still able to make a decision, right? Somebody was saying, it's like, we especially doubt, right? Like this decision paralysis that I was talking about earlier is like a lot of us like, well, what if I get married now, but instead of waiting 10 years, I didn't get to travel. Make a decision, right? Like, and this life, like, oh, now I've had kids. I wish I didn't have kids at this age. Okay, there's nothing you can do now. You have kids. So from this step, from this present moment where you have kids, you're married, what decision do you need to make?
And sometimes, like Henri used to talk about, our teacher Henri McKinnon used to talk about when you feel like you have a lot of choices. Like, say for example, people going into university and trying to figure out what to do at school, or going into the career and which career. So he's like, if you see it as these different paths, then it can feel like, oh, I don't want to take the wrong path. But if you see it as a wheel and you're in the middle and there's all these different spokes, and it's just about which path am I taking right now. I can always come back and pick a different.
Or you go far enough
and then you go around, and then you end up coming back to that same path, right? So trusting the question then not is what should I do, but what is the next step? What feels like the next natural step, the next manageable step for me?
And being able to kind of, like, again, having the courage to take it, even when we're not feeling confident. Right? Like, okay.
Then lean on your friends, lean on your people here in our group, and like, so I was just,
and know that you can make the decision some other people. Like, oh, that didn't work out.
I was just telling somebody this morning, we were talking about that collective, right, and the power of the collective. And I remember when I was pregnant with Sajad, remember our birthing coach? So she had talked to us about how there's going to be a moment in labor where you feel like you're going to die. Like, oh my gosh, I can't stand the pain. This hurts too much. I'm going to die. She's like, it will happen if you don't have the epidural and stuff. There will be this moment where you feel like you're going to die. She's like, in that moment, I want you to tune in to all the other women in the world who are delivering a baby right now and feel strong, and they're actually at that final push and they feel that power of that final push, tune into them and let them help you get through the I'm gonna die moment, right? So it's like we can tune into that. We can rely on all the people on the planet right now who are feeling brave, who are feeling courageous, who are feeling, and it could be in your circle, but it could also be outside of your circle, that people you've never even met or never even know, and you can just imagine all of these people who are courageous, and you're like, I too want that, and you just tap into that and you ask for that. And it was really powerful because I had that moment where I was like, oh my God, I'm dying. And then I pictured these women like in the field, like this, like different sorts of, and then other women in hospitals and other women at home births and all these women around the world, everybody's pushing out these babies. And I'm like, I'm just one of those many women that are pushing out a baby today. And it's not that bad. I mean, it was pretty bad. Childbirth is right. But that's something that I bring to mind when I'm suffering is, there's got to be somebody on the planet right now who's not suffering. Let me tune into them. Let me borrow a little bit of their strength for this moment.
Right. All right. So we've got less than 2 minutes here. Any final words?
Thoughts?
Yeah, final thoughts
From our group that's here. Thank you so much for being here with us, taking this journey. If you're interested in coming into the course, it's on March 16th. It's going to be recorded, so if you even can't make the time and date, you can always watch the recording after. And this is an intro course, and there'll be 3 full-day workshops following that, spread out over a couple of months, where Texas and I will do a deeper dive into each of the topics. So you'll find out more about that if you come to the actual March 16th one.
All right. Just gonna stop all the recording and whatnot.